Bless you.
Morning.
A Year of Learning by Dr. Paul Koningsberg in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Koningsberg, Shimon Reuben ben Labish, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nisan Hara Nisan ben Fardosa. Paula and Bob Bromberg in memory of their dear friend, Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malka Mann in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi, friends of Toby Peres, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef, friends of Avi Gitler, Avrameir ben Shimon, shall assure her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Arav Akiva, Marsha Federbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel ben Harav Shimon. A month of learning by Chaim and Phyllis Reese, in memory of his father, Mordechai ben Yom Tov Lipa, as well as Phyllis and Chaim Reese, in memory of her father, Pinchas ben Avraham. And that is it at this point. May Shamas have an aliyah, cranker Rafia, Velti Yeshiva Shem Atliya, L'chol B'nai Israel, a good Geben Shtiar. Okay, all right. I want to go back, even though we sort of went over to the top of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, I want to go back to that for a moment. I'm just grabbing a chumash while I'm here, because I think that will help us with another piece of the Gemara in a moment. So the Gemara here, okay, was, remember, raising challenges to Rav's point of view, okay, which said that, which in the machloket between Rav and Shmuel, okay, was that these other liquids, to what degree they would be machshir, right? And Rav held that in no way would they ever be machshir, which we seem to imply disagreed with Yosef ben Yoezer's testimony. Shmuel, on the other hand, indicated that the liquids themselves could become tamei, but they weren't going to be machshir other things. Okay. And so that was part of the argument, part of the issue that we see in the Gemara, right? And on the top of the Amud, Rav says, Ishtabish Kahane, the Kohanim made a mistake, right? He argued when they indicated that it was Tahor. Midehu Ta'ama Ela Rav. But this was an issue only for really Rav, says the Gemara. Rav, Mashke Beit Mitbachaya, Tani. Rav was teaching in regards to the liquids that came from the slaughterhouse. Aval Mashke Beit Mitbachaya, but those liquids associated with the Mizbeach, with the altar, like oil or like shemen, or yayin, wine or oil, metame, those would be, okay? And that's basically where we sort of left off. Gufa. Now let's come back to this issue, says the Gemara, and examine it in more detail. Rav Amar Ishtabish Kahane. Rav said that the Kohanim made a mistake. They erred when they said that this oil was tahor. Shmuel Amar Lo Ishtabish Kahane. And Shmuel said that the Kohanim did not make a mistake. And now the Gemara clarifies. Rav Amar Ishtabish Kahane. Rav says the Kohanim made this mistake. On what basis? Revi'i b'kodesh ba'imanayu. Okay. In other words, that according to Rav, these items were fourth degree tumah, and therefore, okay, when they were asked by Haggai, the prophet, about them, va'amru le tahor, they answered him tahor. Now I'm going back to Sefer Haggai, and just for our benefit, I'll do it quickly in English. In chapter 2 of Sefer Haggai, we find, starting with verse 10, the prophet said, text says, in the 4th and 20th day of the 9th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, verse 11, thus saith the Lord of hosts, ask now the priests for instruction, saying, verse 12, if one bears hallowed flesh in the skirt of his garment, and with his skirt do touch bread or pottage or wine or oil or any food, shall it become holy? So this is the question. Okay, he had perhaps a sheretz or something that was set aside in his garment, in his sash, and then that sash touches other foodstuffs, bread, pottage, wine, oil. Okay? The verse in the Sefer Haggai continued, and the priests answered and said, no. Then said Haggai, if one that is unclean by a dead body toucheth any of these, shall it be unclean? And the priests answered and said, it shall be unclean. Okay, and then the text goes on. So that's the scene that the Gemara is discussing, this series of questions that Haggai was asking the Kohanim. Okay? So they're implying, okay, according to Rav, that the Kohanim made a mistake in the first example of something that was set aside, okay, tamei perhaps, and touching other things, because what do you have? You have the, let's say it's a sheretz in the garment. So if the sheretz touches the bread, that becomes a first level, and the bread to the porridge is a second level, and the porridge to the wine, okay, is a third level, all right? And so then if they touch something that's sanctified, that's the fourth level of tumah, okay? So in other words, that's where we get the statement, Revi'i b'kodesh. If something is a fourth level, okay, is sanctified and is a fourth level of kodesh, ba'iminayu. That's what he should have asked of them, right? Va'amru le tahor. Okay, and they said it was tahor, which according to Rav is not the case, because that, if it was kodesh, right, it still could convey tuma to a fifth level. Okay, now, Shmuel Amar lo ishtabesh kahane, and Shmuel says no, the Kohanim did not make a mistake in that case. Chamishi b'kodesh ba'eminayu, fifth level of tuma in regards to something sanctified. That's what he should have asked of them. V'amru le tahor, and they said it was tahor, and that would be correct, right? Because you can't go beyond that. Bishlem Rav, says the Gemara, we understand it's acceptable the perspective of Rav. Hainu diktiv arba'ah. Okay, why? Because it says 4 items. Lechem, bread is 1. Unazid, the pottage is 2. Yayin is 3. Vishemen, and oil is 4. Ela l'Shmuel, but rather l'Shmuel chamisha. There were 5. Minale, how does he get that? Mi kativ v'naga b'kanfo. Is it written in the pasuk, and it touched the edge of his garment? V'naga b'kanfo. It says, and it touched with the edge of the garment. Kativ. So in other words, it wasn't that the sheretz, according to Shmuel, actually directly touched something. It was that the sheretz touched the garment. The garment edge then touched the first item, which was the bread, and so on and so forth. Okay? Bama shenaga bekanfo, in that which was touching the edge of his garment. Okay? Now we go on. Tashma, this is the Braita. Listen to the following. Okay, so now we continue further with the same scenario, right? Vayomer Chagai im yigat tamei nefesh. This was the second example, right? We said this was actually verse 13. If one that is unclean by a dead body touch any of these, shall it be unclean? Okay, and so going back into our Gemara, Vayomer Chagai im yigat tamei nefesh b'chol ele hayitamei, right? Right. So he's tamei nefesh, which is basically from a mace, right? Would the item be impure? V'ya'anu hakohanim vayomru yitamei or yitma, and the kohanim answered it would become tamei. Again, now says the Gemara. Bishlema l'shmuel v'dahacha lo ishtabish. That's acceptable to Shmuel because here they did not make a mistake. Hatam nami lo ishtabish. There also, in the earlier example, the earlier question, says the Gemara, Shmuel also felt they did not make a mistake. Ela l'Rav. But regarding Rav, Ma'ishna hacha de ishtabish, u'ma'ishna hatam de lo ishtabish. Okay, so but for Rav, what is the difference between here? Okay, in the earlier case, okay, he claimed that the Kohanim made an error. U'ma'ishna hatam, and what's the difference there in regards to the corpse, the tamei nefesh, where Rav did not feel they made an error, the lo ishtabish. Amar Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman responds, Amar Rabba bar Abuha, in the name of Rabba bar Abuha. Beki'in hein betumat meit, ve'ein beki'in hein betumat sheretz.
Really?
His answer was that these particular Kohanim were mumchim, so to speak. They were familiar,
Experts.
right? Experienced. They were well aware of what the laws were regarding tumas mace, but regarding tuma from a sheretz, that's a different issue. Okay? I thought about this in preparation. I was a little surprised that someone would offer up this explanation. Okay, I did not see either in Koran or in Art Scroll, okay, that that they would comment on this. In any case, let's go on. Ravina Amar. Ravina is trying to qualify, and I think almost challenge, okay, what Rav Nachman was saying, okay, in the name of Rabba bar Abuha. Hatam Ravi'i. In that case, okay, in our first example, it was really only 4. Hacha shlishi. Here it's 3. Okay? So he had a different count because when he read the pasuk, he didn't read it when it said v'yayin v'shemen as oil and as wine and oil, but as I read it to you in this translation, wine or oil. Okay, so that would make it a different count. All right, let's go on. A new Braita. Right, Tashma. Listen to the following Braita. Vayan Chagai, Vayomer, Kein Ha'am Hazeh, V'chein Hagoy Hazeh Lefanai, Hashem. That is the pasuk that continued after the questions. It was Haggai's response. So is this people, and so is this nation before me, saith the Lord. And so is every work of their hands, and that which they offer there is unclean. Okay, now, says the Gemara. Okay, B'ishlem Rav, Hainu dekativ tameh. Okay, that's statement of Chagai is acceptable to Rav, comparing, right, the people's work, their behavior, to something tameh, because that's what he said when he indicated in the first case that the Kohanim made the error. Ela l'Shmuel, amai tameh. But according to Shmuel's explanation, why then would Chagai have complained that their behaviors are like something that is tameh? So the Gemara says now, itma ohe ka mitama. Okay, that Chaggai's response is not a question of, let's call it inquiry, but rather it's a statement of bewilderment, a statement of wonder, that kind of a question. Okay, Vaha v'chein kol ma'aseh yedehem kativ. And here in the pasuk it says, so all of their handiwork, which is written. In other words, that he's surprised, bewildered. Why is this the case? Amar Mar Zutra, says Mar Zutra, v'itema Rav Ashi, and others say it was Rav Ashi, mitoch shekilkalu et ma'asehim, because they ruined, right, their deeds when they were, their behaviors, their sacrifices, all sorts of their activities, right? What happened? Ma'ale aleihem hakatuv ki'ilu hikrivu bitum. Okay, since their deeds were corrupted, their behavior. Remember the whole issue of treating people, following the korbanot properly, but mistreating other people. Okay, that was like they were offered their korbanot in a state of tumah. Okay, now Gemara comes back and wants to look at another aspect. Okay, since we mentioned these items from Chagai that were used in the temple, and they both mention oil, right, and wine, and we made an earlier identification between liquids that were associated with the slaughterhouse versus liquids that are associated with the Mizbeach, okay, itself, right, because you had Nisuch Hayayin, for example, as one of the korbanot, right? So what happens? We now look at this issue in more detail. Gufa, says the Gemara. Let's look at this. Rav Tani Mashke Beit Mitzvachaya. Rav taught in regarding the liquids of the slaughterhouse. V'Levi Tana mashke beit midbachaya. And Levi taught it was in regards to the liquids associated with the altar. The Levi hanicha. For Levi, that seems valid. Is virele kishmuel. If he holds like Shmuel. The Amar, who said, Dachan, okay, that it's pure, militame tumot acherim, from being machshir, in other words, conveying tuma to other objects. Aval tumat atzmam yesh lehem, but for they themselves to become tameh, that's possible. Mishkachet la, we find this case. Dinag kulhu berisho, right? That we're saying here, okay, that that it would, in regards to it coming in contact with the first item on the list, which was the bread, remember. Ella isavale karav, but if Levi held like Rav, the Amar Dachan Mamash, who says that the liquids were pure whatsoever, Hechi Mishkachat La, how can we find this? Al Karchach Kishmuel Sevirale, that therefore we must say that he must hold like Shmuel. Okay. Ula Shmuel Hanecha. And as far as Shmuel goes, this seems acceptable. Isavarla Karav, because if he held like Rav, the Tani Mashke Beit Mitbachaya, who taught that in Rav's view, it was the liquids associated with the slaughterhouse. Aval Mashke Beit Mitbachaya Acharini, but the liquids associated with the altar were different. Nami mit amau. They also would, nevertheless, the oil or the wine, which were liquids associated with the altar, would still be capable of conveying tumah. Revi'ihu, because they would be fourth level of tumah. Delo avid chamishi, but they wouldn't carry on to a fifth level. Ha shlishi, but if they're third level, avid revi'i, they would transmit to fourth level. Ela isavale kalevi, but if he held like Levi, Datani mashke beimid bachaya, who was teaching that the liquids of the altar, mai iria revi'i, what status is it as a fourth level? Delo avid chamishi, do we say then that it doesn't produce something, carry over, transmit to a fifth level? Afilu sheni ushlishi nami lo avdi. If that's the case, that he said that the altar liquids don't convey tumah, then not only wouldn't it not convey tumah from a fourth to a fifth level, or a third to a fourth level, it wouldn't even convey tumah from to a second level or to a third level. That's what he's saying. Al karchach kirav sfirale. That would then seem to imply that Levi must hold like Rav. Okay. Now, says the Gemara, Tanya kivate de Rav. We have a Braita that teaches similar to Rav. Tanya kivate de Levi. We have a Braita that teaches similar to Levi. Tanya kivate de Levi. Notice the chiastic formula, A, B, B, A. Now we okay, right? Hadam, where it says this Braita, blood, vahayayin and wine, vahashemen and oil, vahamayim and water. Okay? Notice those are all among the 7 liquids we said, at least the Rabbanan are machshir, wine, honey, oil, milk, dew, blood, and water. Mashke beit midbachaya. These are liquids associated with the altar. Shenit ma'u bifnim, votzi'am lachutz. If they became tameh inside, in other words, by the altar, and then they were brought outside, tohorim, they are now considered tahor. Nitma'u bachutz, ve'echnisan bifnim. If they became tameh outside of the altar and brought them then in to the altar area, to the Beis Hamikdash precinct, tme'in, then they would be considered tameh, and they would convey tumah as well. Amy asks the Gemara, is that really the case? Va'amar Rav Yehoshua ben Levi. But didn't Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi say, Mashke beit midbechaya, okay, the liquids associated with the altar, lo amru dachan ela bimkomam, or bimkoman. They did not say that they were tahor only in their place. In other words, implying only there in the temple courtyard, right? My lav lema'ute nitma'u bifnim votzian lachutz. Isn't that to come to exclude the idea that if they became tameh inside and then took them outside? Lo, says the Gemara. The ma'ute nitma'u bachutz vehichnisan bifnim. No, it comes to eliminate, right? If they became tameh outside the area of the Mizbeach, okay, and then were brought in. So the Gemara questions that explanation. Aha, and here, bimkoman kamar, they said in their place, which would seem to imply only there in the altar area, in the temple courtyard. Hachi kamar. This is what it meant to say. Right? Lo amru dachan ele shenitma'u bimkomam. They didn't say that they were pure, okay, only if they became tameh in their place. Okay? Right? In other words, exclude, right? Tanya kavate de Rav. But we also have a Braita, says the Gemara, that taught according to Rav. Hadam v'hamayim, blood and water, mashke beit mitbachaya shenitma'u. They are liquids associated with the slaughterhouse and became tameh. Bein b'kelim, bein b'karka. Regardless if it was in utensils, okay, or whether it was on the ground. Okay, tahorim, they are pure. Okay, and going over to the next Talmud as we continue, Rabban Shimon Omer, says Rabbi Shimon, right? V'kelim tmeim, talking about with utensils they become tameh. Bekarka tahori. But if they're on the ground, okay, they are considered tahor. Okay? This would then seem to follow closer, actually, to Rav's view of what Yossi ben Yoezer was saying. Now, Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa is going to now continue, okay, that, remember we said earlier, just I'm going to come back into the text in a moment, that it was clearly derabanan that these liquids were machshir. Maybe, however, it was thought that they were actually deoraita machshir tumah. So let's see what happens. Rav Papa says, Rav Papa, afilu leman de amar tumat mashkin de oraita. Even according to those who say that the transfer of tuma of these liquids is Torah mandated, mashke beit mitbachaya, the liquids associated with the slaughterhouse, hilchata gamirela. That, okay, is a halacha l'Moshe miSinai. That's a different category, if you will, of halacha, right? And therefore, I could argue that that means that maybe I'm not going to say that those liquids from the slaughterhouse are machshir. Amar le Rav Huna, bered de Rav Natan, le Rav Papa. So Rav Papa now is challenged. Ve'ela, rather, had Amar Rabbi Elazar. But what about the fact that Rabbi Elazar says, Ein tum'ah lemashkin kol ikar, that liquids don't have any, okay, tum'ah. They're not machshir whatsoever. Okay, that would seem to be one way of reading the text. The other could be that what he's saying is Rabbi Eliezer is disagreeing with Rav Papa's idea that these liquids are machshir deoraita, right. Okay, but simply coming back to what we said before, that they are machshir derabanan. Okay, so let's go on and see. Teda sheharei he'id Yosef ben Yoezer. Know therefore that Yosef ben Yoezer ish tzreda gave testimony, al mashke beit mitbachaya dachan, on the liquids associated with the slaughterhouse, that they are pure. Ve'i hilchata gamirela, and if this were a halacha l'Moshe miSinai, mi gamrinan mine, would it be possible to learn anything from that? In other words, halacha l'Moshe miSinai is a unique category. Right? And therefore you can't learn anything else from it. So, going on. Amar le Ravina le Rav Ashi. Okay? So Ravina says to Rav Ashi, Vaha Rabbi Shimon. But what about that? He says, right, that Rabbi Shimon held. Okay? Namely, what did he say? Vaha Rabbi Shimon de Amar Tumat Mashkin de Oraita. That Rabbi Shimon held that liquids had the ability to machshir, to transmit tuma by Torah mandate. Tanya, as taught elsewhere in a Braita, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon Omrim, the two of them said, Lekelim Tohorim, Leochlin Tmein, that in regards to utensils, the utensils would still be tahor, but foodstuffs would be tameh. Vahacha ka'amah. And in here, in this case, right, what did we see? Rabban Shimon b'kelim tmeim b'karka tahorim. He disagreed and said, no, it's with utensils that can become tameh, but any of that liquid that was on the ground, that would be tahor. That would not be machshir. V'i hilchatahi. And if this is a halacha l'Moshe miSinai, mali b'kelim, mali b'karka. What difference does it make? Okay, if it's utensils, what difference does it make if it's on the ground? Okay, if you're saying you can't learn from a halacha l'Moshe miSinai because of its a unique category. Kasha, says the Gemara. That is indeed a problem. Okay. Now, since we mentioned Rabbi Shimon's view, right, that it was a Torah law and not rabbinic, right? And it was Rav Papa who said it. Let's go on. Amar Rav Papa, says Rav Papa, Hada Amrat, right? Or Harda Amrat, that which you said, Bakarka Tahori, okay? When you said that if those liquids were flowing on the ground, that they were tahor, they're not machshir. Lo shanu elamayim. That they only taught in regards to water, right? Aval dam, lo. But in regards to blood, he said, no. The blood in the butchering place, okay, would not be tahor. Could be machshir. Umayim nami lo amran. And as regards to water, they only said this, right? Ela dahave revi'it. Only if you had a certain measure of water, right? Namely a revi'is. Why? Dechazi lahat bilbei machatin v'tzinorot. Because a revi'is of water is enough if you have to be, if you have to immerse certain items to make them tahor, like metal hooks or metal needles, right? But, says the Gemara, aval lo have revi'it tamein. But if you didn't have a revi'is of water, those items would remain tameh. Okay, they're susceptible to tumor. Okay, Gemara continues now. Okay, with this discussion of the tumor status of mashkin. Amar Mar, the master said, in other words, the Gemara previously mentioned to us, Rabbi Yehuda Omer called Tameh. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda said basically, right, that anything touched by these beverages, they machshir, okay, and are therefore susceptible to tumah. Lanim Emra comes to tell us, Desavar Rabbi Yehuda, tumat mashkin, v'tameh, tumat kelim deoraita. Does this mean to tell us then that Rabbi Yehuda was of the opinion that the ability, I'm going to say, of liquids to transmit tumah implies, particularly regarding the status of utensils, that he holds that such ability of liquids is a Torah mandated aspect. But the Gemara continues, Vahatnan, but aren't we taught elsewhere in a Mishnah, Kol hakelim sheyesh lehem achorim v'toch, kigon hakarim, baksatot, v'hasakim, v'armartzufim, all utensils that have both a back and I'm going to call it a bowl, an inside, okay? For example, pillows, right? Okay, so in other words, it has an outside and an inside, right? V'haksatot, okay? Or let's say cushions. V'hasakin, and let's say there are bags. V'hamartzufim, and there are leather bags, right? Nitma tocho, nitma gabo. If it becomes tameh inside, likewise it's tameh outside. Okay? Nitma gabo, lo nitma tocho. If it becomes tameh outside, it is not tameh inside. That's what's in Kalim, right? So what happens? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, B'med Varim Amurim. What were we talking about there? Shenitma'u mechamat mashkin. We're talking about whether it becomes tamei based on liquids. Aval nitma'u mechamat sheretz. But if it were to become tamei by contact with a sheretz, he says, nitma tocho, nitma gabo. If it's inside is tamei, the outside is tamei. Nitma gabo, nitma tocho. If it's outside is tamei,
so the inside.
Ve'i salka da'atach. And if you want to think, tumat mashkin l'tamei kelim de'olaita, if you want to consider that liquids that can be machshir, right, that can transmit tuma, apply to utensils, is Torah mandated, mali nitma mechamat mashkin, mali nitma mechamat sheretz. Then what difference should it be whether the items become tamei based on liquids or whether the item becomes tamei based on the prohibited animal? Amar Rav Yehuda. Says Rav Yehuda as follows. Amar Shmuel. Okay. So Rav Yehuda says then in the name of Shmuel, Chazar. So this is Rav Yehuda, who's a Amora, says in the name of Shmuel, okay, the Tana, Chazar bo Rabbi Yehuda. He says that Rabbi Yehuda, the Tana, recanted. What does that mean? Let's see. Ravina now is going to start a different answer. He says as follows. La'olam lo hadar. No, Rabbi Yehuda did not recant. Ha b'mashkin haba'in mechamat yadayim. No, he was talking about a situation that these beverages became tamei because of human contact, right? In other words, direct contact. Ha b'mashkin haba'in mechamat sheretz. And these others became liquids, became tamei through contact, okay, with a sheretz, right? And there, if it's a utensil, remember we understand that it's different, okay? Right? That's the point. Ihachi, if that's the case, adatani b'med varim amorim, if they're talking about then what are they dealing with? Shenitma'u mechamat mashkin, that they became tamei through contact with beverages. Liflog v'litnei b'dida. Okay, if that's the case, right, then let him separate them and teach it that way by itself. Namely, b'med varim amorim. What are we talking about? Mashkin haba'in mechamat yadayim. We're talking then about liquids that have become tamei by direct contact and then transfer. Aval b'mashkin haba'in mechamat sheretz. But regarding those items, beverages that came in contact with a sheretz, nitma tocho, nitma gabo. Then we would say, if it's inside is tamei, it's outside is tamei. Nitma gabo, nitma tocho. If it's outside is tamei, it's inside is tamei. Ela mechavarta kedeshaninan meikara. No, it must be therefore clear that it's taught as we originally thought, Chazar bo Rabbi Yehuda. namely that Rabbi Yehuda
Recanted.
must have retracted his earlier ruling. Okay. Ibayalahu. So now we come to another question, right? Regarding Rabbi Yehuda's position. Mikelim hudahadarbe. Okay. It would seem then we could say that whether it transfers tuma to utensils, perhaps he recanted in that regard. Aval ba'ochlin, but in regards to foodstuffs, Rabbi Yossi v'Rabbi Shimon svirale, that maybe he still holds like Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon. O Dilma, or perhaps legamre hadarbe Rabbi Meir. Or do we say that Rabbi Yehuda totally recanted and therefore he holds instead like Rabbi Meir? So the Gemara wants to suggest as follows to try to answer. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. He says, Tashma, listen to the following braita that might give us an answer. Para sheshatata mechatat. If you have a calf, a cow, and it drank the chatas water. Remember, right? That's the water that's mixed with the ashes and it's used for sprinkling, right? To make people tahor. Bisara tameh. Its flesh is now considered tameh. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda says, as we just roll over a little bit, right? Bitlu b'me'eha, that water has become nullified in its stomach, in its intestines. Ve'isal geda'atach mikelim hu dahadarbe. And if you're of the opinion that maybe Rabbi Yehuda only recanted his view in regards to the utensils, aval ba'ochlin k'Rabbi Yossi v'Rabbi Shimon svirale, and that therefore regarding the foodstuffs, he might, like Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, still hold the opinion. Amai bitlu b'me'eha legamri. Okay. Why then would we say? Why then would he have said that this mixture, right, water mixture, is now nullified totally in the intestines of the animal, right? Nehi de tum'ah chamura lo tam'o. We might say, right, that that this is a more stringent tuma, a more severe level of tuma, okay, right? And therefore it shouldn't be nullified. Tuma kala miha nitma'u. But a lesser level of tuma might become, right, a slighter degree of tuma could become nullified.
Nullified.
Right? So the Gemara asks real quickly, Ma'i bitlu b'me'eha nami, right? What do we mean? What's the issue when it says Rabbi Yehuda's statement that they became nullified? Bitlu mitum'ah chamura. It became nullified from a more stringent, right, a more severe level of tuma, aval tuma kala mitam'o. But maybe it means that it still contaminates with a slight level of tuma. Miklal the Tanakama savar tuma chamura nami mitam'o ha b'shara tamekatai. So we're going to pick up with this issue tomorrow, okay, where the Gemara challenges that idea, okay, as to whether that mixture, okay, is a tuma chamura or a tuma kala, and what happens and what does that imply towards Rabbi Yehuda's position. Okay, so that's where we'll pick up tomorrow. Okay. Everybody stay well, take care, and stay warm today. All right?
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Thank you
Take
very
care.
much. Have a great day, everyone.
Have a good day.
Have a good day, everybody.